So the Conservative Party, as a political party, they really do pride themselves on fiscal responsibility, right? It is the party of sensible economic policies. You know, we're not wasting money, we're not just going to throw cash at problems, we're going to be sensible, and we're going to have, we're going to be very conservative with our spending, as the name would suggest. We're not like Labour, we don't think there's a magic money tree. And they really do bang on about that a lot, and often Conservatives ask people on the left, how on earth are you going to pay for whatever it is, a jobs guarantee or infrastructure investment or reversing privatisation in the NHS, things like that, reducing class sizes by building more schools and training more teachers. How are you going to pay for it? The Tories, just not going to do that, right? Well, it may surprise you to find out that the Conservatives have actually wasted billions of pounds in taxpayer money over the last couple of years. So data that I've got here that was collated by the Churchill Project demonstrates very, very, very simply how this Conservative government has actually been not very fiscally responsible at all. So the list, will put it up on the screen now. It is truly baffling. So some of them that stand out to me the most are unused coveralls, which I believe was to do with the PPE scandal, where there was shortages. The wastage was £687 million. That's how much went. And I believe there was an analysis done that showed you would only need about £30,000 a year to house and fully rehabilitate a homeless person. So that's a shame. Inaccurate antibody tests, 75 million. Salford testing trial forced to stop and scale back, 500 million I should say. What else have we got? Oh, of course, Serco with the broken tracing system, 108 million. And it goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on. But it gets really, really bafflingly bad when you get to the very bottom there. So the Treasury's job retention bonus cost 2.6 billion. 2.6 billion pounds. And this is a Conservative list. There is more out there. This isn't an exhaustive list. So the Conservatives have wasted billions of pounds, and that's only in the last couple of years. There's been many different scandals where the Tories have been giving out public contracts to their friends. As we know, Matt Hancock, his sister, has a major stake in a company that's been given lucrative NHS contracts. Dido Harding has close links to the Conservative Party, and she was put in charge of the Serco track and trace system. Never had experience in anything like that before, and the company, Serco, had never had any experience in that before. We've seen it right the way through since the Tories took power. And this kind of cronyism and arguably corruption isn't unique to the Conservatives. These kind of things did happen when Labour was in power. And I fully condemn those as well. But I think what is really interesting is that on the front of corruption, New Labour did do a lot about, especially under Tony Blair. There were a good few cases where dodgy things like that happened. If Peter Mandelson's nearby, things are going to be at least a little bit sleazy. But the Conservatives did that. They do that too, and clearly there's massive evidence of that. But what I think is actually kind of more important to recognise is that the government, this Conservative government, are also wasting lots of public money because of their incompetence. It's not just their cronyism, it's not just the sleaze, it's not just the corruption where they're giving out stuff to their friends, right? And we've covered things like that on the show before, and everyone knows they do it. Everyone. There are no consequences, of course. because why should there be? They're only the people in charge of the country. But they're actually, through the incredible power of their own mental vacancy, are continuously wasting money on projects that won't work. Now, I think it's important to say, we also do have to look at even those things, like those coveralls that weren't allowed to be used, that cost, I think it was 100 million odd. In fact, I'll get that up on my phone now. Yes, so those unused coveralls cost £687 million. Some inaccurate antibody tests cost £75 million. This is enormous waste that could make a huge tangible difference to the lives of thousands of people in this country, right? You could build schools and train teachers and train teaching assistants with that. You could start paying nurses decent wages with that. You know, the 1% pay rise, we've all heard it, the government's going to do that. That's a real term pay cut in terms of, since 2010 anyway. And the Royal College of Nurses are saying, well actually, really, all things considered, the fair increase would be 15%. And that's totally fair, especially when you look at how wages in general anyway have stagnated over the past 10 years. We just had the worst decade of wage growth since the Napoleonic War, for God's sake. So clearly, these policies of cuts and inaccurate spending, and spending that is not strategic in any manner, and that focuses on putting more money at the top and less at the bottom, and less in the pockets of working people, it doesn't work, right? It doesn't work economically and morally. It's just totally vacant, right? It just doesn't work. But we do have to look at it through the lens of corruption as well, because when you have a government that is trying to manipulate public services, manipulate essential utilities, and manipulate taxpayer money in such a way that it can benefit the extraordinarily wealthy individuals who donate to their party, then it means you're more likely to get situations where things just don't end up working, right? And that's the story time and time again of government corruption in the UK, of conservative politics, and of course privatisation. You know, the railways, for example, have demonstrably gotten worse since they were privatised. They weren't that good when they were publicly owned, let's be clear about that, but a lot of the public ownership plans that exist now are actually really good, and I think that we should definitely do that. But the rail fares have increased massively, way ahead of inflation or anything, and fundamentally the service is worse, right? Certainly worse if you equate for the fact that the technology's gotten so much better. And it's because people get involved whose motivation is to make money. And to make more money, and then more money, and more money, or cling on to power and then increase their power, and increase their power over and over again. And their heart is not in the right place whatsoever. And that's why I believe more in collective ownership. I believe in worker cooperatives. I believe in public ownership of essential utilities and services. You know, rail, mail, water and energy. I think all of those should be publicly owned. They should be run in the interests of the people. And they should be run by the people, rather than a handful of extraordinarily wealthy shareholders in a bunch of different private companies. So that's what's going on here, right? The government are trying their utmost to reward the ultra wealthy, the super rich individuals. You know, often they're CEOs, they're billionaires, they're hedge fund managers, etc. Because they donate to their party. So the deal is, well, you give us money back, right? You stay in power, we keep funding your party, we keep, you know, saying lovely things about you in the media, and then you maintain and improve our material wealth, even though it's already enormous, right? So the government has wasted billions of pounds over the last few years, and it's an outrage, right? It's an outrage. So next time you hear politicians or journalists or anyone at all saying that you can't trust Labour in power because they are going to spend too much money and it's going to be a waste, and they're going to be doing things like free broadband, which actually would have been incredibly useful throughout the course of the pandemic, but whatever. Just say to them, well, the Conservatives aren't exactly a fiscally responsible source either, because they've clearly wasted massive amounts of public money on projects that simply haven't worked. They simply haven't worked. And they only seem to care about the wealth and well-being of themselves and their wealthy and well-connected mates. So the Conservative Party, they don't care about fiscal responsibility. They just care about keeping working people poor and the super rich super rich. That's all it is, right? And I certainly hope that people start to realise that, because the statistics there are really, really very, very sad. And even if you look at it like, oh well, you know, the government made mistakes. It wasn't because they were giving it out to their mates and their donors. They just made mistakes. Well, that's still awful. They're the government. They shouldn't be making these kind of mistakes. And ideologically, they're always moving towards private solutions rather than public solutions. And that ideological restriction is also causing them a lot of problems, right? So any way you look at it, it reflects really badly on the Tories and on the government. But of course, Labour do have to come out and be stronger against this, because they haven't been giving us all that much as of late. So yeah, let me know what you think in the comments below, because I'm interested to know your thoughts. And I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.